When Scarface hit theaters in 1983, it was met with Rotten Tomatoes and curses, and director Brian De Palma was even nominated for a Golden Raspberry as the worst in his profession. The film was slammed for its excessive violence, unrealistic portrayal of Cubans, and of course, terrible direction. The only ones who got any praise were the actors. Even though people thought the movie and the performances were awful, they admitted that playing such vile scumbags so convincingly took real acting skill. But as often happens, time proved things weren't so simple, and the film gradually gained cult status. Critics who had trashed the film suddenly softened their tone, and those who had stayed quiet before began singing its praises. Still, there were some exceptions. One of the most famous American critics, Roger Ebert, praised the film right away. Director Martin Scorsese also loved it, but at the premiere, he warned Pacino and De Palma to brace themselves for the worst. He added, though, that no matter what, people would remember them, and that was what really mattered. Anyway, let's talk about the wild production journey of Scarface. If the production had gone smoothly, the movie would have turned out very different from the one we know today. It was originally supposed to be directed by Sidney Lumet, known for 70s hits like Serpico and Network. He was brought onto the project by Al Pacino and producer Martin Bregman. The trio had previously teamed up on Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon. Both films were hits at the box office. But work on Scarface was rocky from the start. Lumet wanted a political angle, pointing fingers at the US government for enabling crime and flooding the country with drugs. Pacino, who liked to stir the pot, was on board with Lumet's vision, but producer Martin Bregman thought mass audiences wouldn't care about a political message. He wanted the story to focus on the criminals themselves. Unable to agree, Bregman quickly fired Lumet and replaced him with Brian De Palma, who was best known at the time for Carrie. The script was written by Oliver Stone, who would go on to direct Platoon and Wall Street. He started the script while Lumet was still attached, but after Lumet left, Stone went all in. At the time, Stone was already known for writing Midnight Express, another drug-themed film that raked in box office cash and earned him Golden Globes and Oscars. Oliver has always been a bit of a character. Back then, he was heavily into drugs. According to him, the grass might have been greener in those days, but life was rough, and his mornings often started with him finding something illegal and shoving it into his system. Sometimes he was so messed up he'd spend the night under a park bench. But when he was offered the chance to write Scarface, he got it together and flew to Europe to distance himself from the people supplying his habit. So, when he wrote the script, he partly drew from personal experience, but that doesn't mean he was totally out of his mind while writing it. Al Pacino wasn't the only one who landed his role without much of an audition. Stephen Bauer, who played Manny, got the part just by showing up. As soon as casting director Alex Gordon saw him, she immediately introduced him to Brian De Palma and Martin Bregman, saying Bauer was perfect for the role. They agreed, and Bauer got the part without even auditioning. In the end, he was the only actual Cuban in the cast. At that moment, John Travolta probably let out a sigh. According to a bunch of rumors, he called the Scarface producer from every phone he could get his hands on. Brian De Palma, who had worked with Travolta on Blowout, had no problem with casting him, but the producer's word meant more. Maybe if Blowout hadn't bombed at the US box office, Travolta would have landed the role of Manny. Then again, if the film, which was pretty pricey for its time, had been a hit, Travolta might have passed on a major but still supporting role. The biggest challenge was casting the female lead. Al Pacino and Brian De Palma were set on casting anyone but the then unknown Michelle Pfeiffer. Even Sigourney Weaver was considered. Pacino and De Palma pushed hard for her, hoping to convince producer Martin Bregman to change his mind. The most hotly debated contender was Glenn Close. She wasn't that well known at the time either, but she impressed everyone at auditions, except for Martin Bregman. He told De Palma and Pacino that while they were clearly talented, when it came to casting, he knew better, and they were the proof. At this point, anyone even slightly familiar with how things work in Hollywood might start to get suspicious and catch a faint whiff of Harvey in the air. Just a few years earlier, Michelle had competed in the Miss California beauty pageant and starred in downright trashy films like Charlie Chan and The Curse of the Dragon Queen. Later, everyone would admit how wrong they were, and how brilliant Michelle really was, even though, during filming, she managed to cut Al's face and send him to the hospital. Most of the movie was shot in Los Angeles, made to look like Miami. The original plan was to shoot in Miami, but once certain people found out what kind of film they were making, they made it clear they wouldn't tolerate that portrayal of Cubans. They warned that if the crew came to Miami, the entire Cuban community in Florida would show up and shut the production down. And if Al Pacino ended up in their hands, he'd never look the same again. According to another version, Al Pacino wasn't intimidated at all by the threats and even suggested shooting at protesting Cubans if they got in the way of his genius. But the Miami Tourism Board came to the Cubans' defense and did everything possible to make sure the creators of Scarface were denied permission to film in Florida. That move immediately raised the film's budget, and since Brian De Palma had a reputation for being terrible with money, the producers' expenses quickly ballooned. Officially, turning Los Angeles into Miami cost $25 million. Some unofficial sources even say $37 million, which sounds absolutely insane. Adjusted for inflation, that would be over $100 million today. But moving the shoot to Los Angeles wasn't the only thing that blew up the budget. Production was halted several times due to bad weather. At one point, filming had to be delayed for an entire week after Al Pacino, caught up in a shootout scene, grabbed a gun by the wrong end and got severely burned. He was rushed to the hospital, again, and spent over a week recovering. On top of that, De Palma's obsession with making the explosions look extra impressive nearly got 2 stuntmen killed because they were loaded up with way too many explosives. And fun fact, even Steven Spielberg dropped by to help blow stuff up. At the time, he was working on the Twilight Zone nearby, and after visiting the Scarface set one day, he asked for a camera. Reportedly, he shot several scenes of the house raid at the end of the film. There have long been rumors that the actors and the director sometimes used cocaine on set. Of course, it was just to get into character and better understand how to film the scenes. Officially, those rumors were denied. Al Pacino said he's not sure what caused it, but his nose hasn't worked properly since. According to him, the problem started during filming, and it never went away. What's really surprising is that Scarface didn't hit any major issues during post-production. When the footage was brought to the studio, everyone freaked out. The director was asked to tone it down by cutting some scenes so the film could pass the Motion Picture Association's approval, but he didn't. Because of the violence, the MPAA tried to slap the film with an X rating, which back then was basically a death sentence. But Brian De Palma, who had researched the film by going through police archives, was outraged and called for help. Help came from the police department, which reviewed the rough cut and said the film was actually an accurate depiction of reality. After that, the board's outrage turned into polite requests to just trim a few scenes. De Palma agreed and eventually brought the film back for review. This time, the board gave Scarface a standard R rating. Later, the director said he only messed with the color filters in a few scenes, and the only thing he really shortened was the shot of the severed hand during the chainsaw scene. Some people think this scene was included just to distract the board from other parts of the movie. But with Scarface, that tactic failed, thanks to the political controversy surrounding the project from the beginning. Hollywood directors pull that kind of trick all the time. For instance, Martin Scorsese had admitted more than once that he purposely throws in one over-the-top bloody scene to rile up the board. According to him, once they see something shocking, they forget about everything else and zero in on the one moment they think is the worst. Scarface hit theaters in December 1983. It had a solid opening, but couldn't claim the #1 spot thanks to Clint Eastwood's sudden impact. The new Dirty Harry film came out the same day and dominated the box office. John Carpenter didn't do much better. His movie Christine also came out that day and landed in 4th place. Even though Scarface lost to Eastwood's film, it still pulled in a decent $44 million at the US box office. International sales added another $21 million, bringing the total to $65 million. For a film with a $25 million budget, that's not bad at all. So when people say Scarface was a box office flop, they're usually going off the unconfirmed $37 million budget. If the movie really cost that much, then after marketing costs and the theater cuts, the studio might have lost money. A lot of people blame critics for the film's box office struggles. The movie was slammed from all angles. Plenty of Hollywood insiders also went on record saying they didn't enjoy watching it, but there were exceptions. Actor Eddie Murphy, for example, loved Scarface and called it one of his favorite movies. And as mentioned earlier, Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So unlike many critics, he never had to walk back his opinion. But not everyone came around. Well-known critic Leonard Maltin, who gave Scarface a single point when it came out, later kept referencing De Palma's film in his reviews, usually to express disbelief at its popularity and criticize people who couldn't see how bad he thought it was. Today, there's no question that Scarface has had a massive impact on pop culture. It's referenced in countless Hollywood movies, TV shows, and video games.
Sell the whole pound at once.
To who? What do I look like, Scarface?
These days, it's a cult classic, and praising it is practically required if you want to sound like a real film buff. As for Brian De Palma's Golden Raspberry nomination for Worst Director, it's still one of the funniest things people bring up. The Razzie organizers say it was only the third year of the awards, and there weren't many voters yet. That's how a director could get nominated by just a couple of people, which is exactly what happened. Meanwhile, everyone else was giving standing ovations at the mere mention of De Palma's name or the movie title. Al Pacino agrees with all the praise. In interviews, he's repeatedly said that Tony Montana is one of his favorite roles he's ever played. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.